Now that Thrawn Treason has been released, we have a full canon Thrawn Trilogy. I thought it would be interesting to take a look back at these three books and compare them to Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command, the original Legends Thrawn Trilogy that deserves all the credit for kicking off the Star Wars extended universe in the early 90s. Which trilogy is better? That's what we'll be discussing today. Personally, I prefer the Legends books. I will fully admit that I think nostalgia is certainly a factor in that decision, but I remember reading them for the first time, loving that we were getting more adventures with Luke, Leia, and Han fighting against a new kind of villain. Someone smart that had them on the run for most of the trilogy, who lost because of the decisions of those that came before him. Thrawn was a compelling villain that I always really enjoyed. But I'm coming to realize that I think he's one of those characters that loses the mysterious cool factor the more we know about him. When he shifts from antagonist to full-on protagonist of a story, he starts to get kind of annoying. I found humor in that, especially when he was paired up with Anakin in Thrawn Alliances, but most of the time he just came off as way too smart, and I want someone to root for in a story. Thrawn is just someone I know is going to come out on top, so it became hard to become invested in his stories. Weirdly, I think the first canon Thrawn book, the one just titled Thrawn, is my favorite of all 6 books. I loved seeing his origin story, I loved that it took place over a large number of years, and it gave Thrawn some adversity. We knew he was smart enough to overcome his obstacles, but most of his fights were against his allies. He was being kept down by prejudice and racism. That gave me a reason to really root for him to win, because that's the kind of problem you can't always just outsmart to overcome. I also thought Night Swan was a compelling antagonist, someone who served as kind of a Moriarty to Thrawn's Sherlock Holmes. The first canon Thrawn book is one of my favorite canon books so far. But Alliances and Treason didn't live up for me, and I don't really fault Timothy Zahn for that. I think the biggest problem I have with this new trilogy is that it feels so limited. Like, it's clear to me that Zahn has this idea for a larger Chiss conflict with the threats of the unknown regions, but at the moment he can't explore it because Thrawn and his fate have become intertwined with Star Wars Rebels. So instead of exploring that really interesting stuff, it just feels like we're stuck in the Rebels timeline. We're seeing what Thrawn did for a couple weeks in between seasons 3 and 4, or for just 1 week right before the series finale. That has to be limiting, and it's difficult to invest in the problem when you know Thrawn is just going to be taken away by space whales soon after. That's where the Legends trilogy excels. We were in completely unexplored territory. Zahn had some limitations, of course, but not nearly as many as it seems he has now. For example, the character of Joruus C'baoth was originally going to be a dark side clone of Obi-Wan. The Noghri were originally going to be called the Sith, because at the time nobody knew what a Dark Lord of the Sith was. Stuff like that. But at least it felt like he could break new ground on the galaxy, and that's kind of my biggest issue with the canon books right now, I think. They feel limited compared to the old Legends stories, and that does make sense. It's part of the give and take. Back in the early 90s, we didn't know the prequels were coming, and we definitely didn't know we were going to get more movies after that. The books were the backbone of the universe. They were the driving force moving the story forward. Now it feels like all the big, galaxy-changing events are being reserved for the movies, which I completely agree with, but movies take a lot of time to finish, so in the meantime, we're kind of sitting around waiting for the movies to be made, and the books just kind of tread water, exploring characters and events we're already familiar with rather than doing something new. And that's why I prefer Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command over Thrawn, Alliances, and Treason. Don't get me wrong, there was some weird stuff in there, but I'd rather authors get the chance to swing for the fences and be a little risky rather than be told they can only tell the story of when Thrawn was missing for a few days in Star Wars Rebels. Now, all that said, while I have some frustrations with the current state of the Star Wars books, I think things might get better in the near future. I think a lot of problems I see are just the nature of having one giant shared universe. I can't think of another fandom this big that has to include so many different forms of media. Movies, live-action shows, animated shows, video games, books, comics, audio dramas, and more. It's a lot, and we're only in the first 5 years or so of the rebooted canon. I think Lucasfilm's primary concern up until now was figuring out what was going on with the Skywalker saga. When Episode 9 releases in December, I think or hope we'll see a shift in how Star Wars media is handled. We'll be done with the Skywalkers, liberated to explore the galaxy at large. We're already getting a live-action show this November about brand new characters and unexplored worlds. We know the next 2 movie trilogies will be about new characters and new locations. I think the books will probably follow suit. We don't yet know what Project Luminous is, but I think there's potential for that to also be something brand new. A book, or maybe book and comic media project, exploring something we've never seen before. That's exactly what I would love to see. I want the books to feel important to the galaxy again. We've definitely seen some excellent explorations of characters in novels like Thrawn or Phasma, but I don't want every book to be a tie-in. I'd love to get a new series of stories I can only read, like The New Jedi Order or something like that. And to circle everything back to Thrawn and his stories, I do think there is an avenue for Timothy Zahn to continue the story he's been setting up in the last 3 books. Thrawn seems like he's out of the picture until Dave Filoni wants to do something with him, but at this point we've spent enough time with characters like Eli Vanto, Admiral Aralani, and other members of the Chiss Ascendancy that I don't think we need Thrawn. I'd love to see Zahn step away from his breakout character. Let's explore the Grisk, the Chiss, and their potential civil war through another pair of red eyes, or through Eli. I've been hooked enough by that story that I don't need Thrawn around to be invested. In fact, seeing the Chiss and Eli deal with tactical threats without the unstoppable genius of Thrawn would be even more exciting in my opinion, and I don't see Lucasfilm having any major film plans for the Chiss, so that's the perfect scenario for Zahn to just run free in the unknown regions where he can do anything he wants without consequence to any other ongoing story. I hope this video didn't feel too ranty. I've mentioned these thoughts about the state of the Star Wars books before, but I see so much more potential that I would love to see explored, and I'm very optimistic about their future. I've really loved some of the movie tie-in books, but a little variety never hurt anyone. I just miss the freedom to be weird that Legends had, and that's not realistic with the way the current canon is being developed. But if we could just reserve the occasional big story here or there for a series of books, I think that would go a long way. But what do you guys think? Do you prefer the canon or the Legends Thrawn Trilogy? What do you hope to see in the future of Star Wars books? Let me know in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and consider checking out our Patreon page. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.